What's that painting in the background?
This,
Yeah.
that is Ben Bomer's Cappadocia album art.
Oh fuck, I thought it was like you went to the Uluru or something and you took a picture and brought it back and then framed it.
What's the Uluru?
You live in Australia and you don't know what the Uluru is.
I don't know what the Uluru is, dude.
It's one of the natural wonders of the world. It changes color depending on the time of day that you look at it. The Aborigines consider it sacred. You have to see it.
To go northern.
I also think your bachelor party should happen in Darwin. You live in Australia and you don't know what the Uluru is. I want to fight a crocodile.
Come back.
They call them salties in Australia. Welcome to the Art of Possible podcast, where we discuss how to achieve impossible dreams by using everyday people's lives as templates that you can incorporate in your own. Yeah, if you look at where you are today and what you have achieved so far, how do you think that compares to what 18-year-old thought you would do, or even 16-year-old thought you would want to do or you would accomplish in the next 10 to 20 years?
I think 16-year-old me was very enamored by titles and brands associated with those titles. For example, being an investment banker, working in private equity, working for a top consulting firm, going to a really fancy business school, living in a big thriving city that's perceived to be cool to live in, like New York or London, as somebody who grew up in Calcutta. And I feel like 16-year-old me looking at 28-year-old me would be very sort of proud of what I've done and almost surprised that out of the 10 things that I wanted to achieve, I probably achieved 5 of them. But I have almost never taken the path that I thought I would to achieve those 5 things. And there are obviously 5 that I haven't achieved, which hopefully soon. It'll be surprising to my 16-year-old self that I got here using these weird, unconventional paths. It wasn't a straight line.
All right. What are the 5 that you accomplished and the 5 that you haven't yet?
I feel like I wanted to go to business school. I want to go to business school in the US, like a top school like Harvard or Stanford. Haven't done that yet. It's probably one dream with the weight of 5 because it's the oldest running dream that I have. Now, I saw this video, the Casey Neistat video a couple of days back, where he's talking about getting into an accident when he was 21, 22 years old in New York. He breaks his leg. They have to put a steel bar. And then when he's in the hospital, he writes how he's going to run a sub 3-hour marathon at some point in his life. And he keeps coming back to that dream. He keeps passively chasing that dream, sometimes actively chasing that dream. Sometimes he forgets about it at the back of his head, but he just keeps doing it. And then sometimes he wants to leave it and let it go. And he rationalizes how like this dream is weighing on him and it's not important for him to run a sub 3 marathon. He's already run maybe multiple marathons in 3-hour 2 minutes or 3-hour 5 minutes. Why is the sub 3 so important? But it doesn't matter why it's so important. If it's important and you got to do it, then you just keep doing it until you get it, or you keep doing it and the process and the story and the things that you learn are fun. So I feel like I really thought that associates with my goal of going to school, where I'm probably 28. I'm a little older than what the average kid who goes to business school is like, but it doesn't matter. I always feel like this year I'm going to give it my 100%. I hope this year I'm going to give it my 100%.
Where did this come from? Because I remember I had absolutely no ambitions about McKinsey or investment banking or any of that shit before I met you. And there was a long time where it felt like you knew everything there was to know about this subject. You know, you had spoken to people from these places, probably alums or something like that. You told us a story of how you went to this party in Calcutta where it was some guy whose house had a waterfall inside it and he was wearing a blazer with like a Harvard logo like monogrammed on it. Or maybe I'm like confusing 2 different stories or something like that. But it's okay. What exactly were they? The waterfall house was separate from the Harvard blazer, or?
There's a guy whose house I went to. It was really fancy. And I think he had worked for Deloitte in strategy partner, and had moved on from there, but just like had this aura of I am a statesman, I know people, very smooth talker, felt like he had presence. I don't know if I understood that concept when I went, but what I understood from the way that his house was and the people and the conversations he was having and the way that he presented himself, I was like, maybe at like 35-year-old me would want to be like this guy because he looks cool. It's a very superficial judgment. And I was like, I'm going to chase this.
So the books you read, how did you find out about this whole McKinsey BCG thing? Because you used to talk about it a lot. I had no clue what any of this shit was, but where did it come from? How did you find out?
There's this show that actually makes fun of consultants. It's called House of Lies. It has Don Cherry. Yeah, and I watched that show when I was in school. And then I started researching, is this how it actually is? Like, what is this thing where you get put on flights to go to manufacturing plants that you have no business and you get paid a lot of money to solve their problems? It seemed really cool to me that you go there not knowing anything about the business, but you're advising the CEO on what to do because you're just perceived to be smart. And I think that show also told me that you need to be really like qualified in a certain way. Like you need to have a Harvard, Stanford, Wharton degree. And I was like, oh, so that's the path to get there. You have to get to these schools and then leave them. You have this personal brand and that is built up by these other brands and titles that are associated with you. And that's when people value and ask you to come and give you advice. You're just a smart person who they feel like they can trust with their critical business problems and you solve it for them. And that's where the dream came from, of going to one of these schools and working at one of these organizations, which honestly, I felt like my goals and ambitions have always been very ambitious. And I feel like at every point that I've made them, they've been larger than life and they've driven me towards them, but they've always felt like I probably won't achieve exactly this. I'll achieve something like this, but not this.
But have you ever achieved exactly something that you aimed for?
Not yet. I've always gotten the 90% version.
Okay. I feel like I have gotten exactly what I wanted several times, but after I got it, I was like, why did I aim this low?
Aim this low?
Yeah. So I aim for the 90 or the 80 range, typically. I tell myself that 100 is improbable as hell. Aiming for 100... or that's what I used to tell myself. Aiming for 100 means that you have a higher likelihood of getting embarrassed because you chose a goal that there is no higher goal than, and then you failed to achieve it. At least that's how I saw it in my head, perhaps subconsciously. I didn't actively work it out that way, but I remember before the GRE, my mother asked me, what score do you think you're going to get? And I said, I'm aiming for a 335 out of 340. And she said, okay, all right. And then I got a 335. And the first thing she said was, you should have said you would get a 340. And that's what you would have gotten. And that really stuck with me because I didn't prepare for a 340. I prepared for a 335. And it's like when you do hit that goal that you aimed for, you're going to be embarrassed that you didn't try harder. So,
but a 335 is an exceptional score. Like most people in the world will not even aim for a 335. How did you get that benchmark? Like how did it be like, I'm just gonna get 335? Because usually when people take the GRE, they're like, oh, I'm gonna get a 325 above, it's fine. Like it's a really high score.
I think it could be several factors. So we had some seniors, one of them got a 340 SARS. One of them had, if I remember correctly, a 338, Amrit. And then Srijesh's first attempt was like a 329 or something like that. And then he saw his batchmates get higher scores. So I think he went back and gave it again. And he got a 335, if I remember correctly. So perhaps to me it was, if I wanna, like I set that as my minimum threshold. I just need to breach the surface of what these guys have accomplished, and that's probably good enough. I didn't dare think of myself as being more capable than all of these people who I felt were so much smarter and more accomplished than me. Like I always saw myself as potential man, right? And like that word is something that I picked up from anime.
Potential man.
Yeah, so if you look at Jujutsu Kaisen, it's a new age anime. There's one character called Megumi who is incredibly powerful and talented. But there's a scene where his teacher straight up, after like kicking his ass 20 times in a mock fight, tells him, you will never surpass even my assistant. Like the next guy, forget me, right? you're not going to surpass an above average person if you don't believe that you're capable of it. And the reason you don't try that hard is because you don't believe you'll ever need to try that hard. And I guess in the anime, it's specific to that guy's circumstance. Like, he has a end-all move that involves him dying as well, that he can always call upon when he's in a problem he can't get out of. But he's told that you're using this as a crutch, right? But anyway, later on in the series, what used to happen was this guy never quite hit his full potential in the series, so fans started calling him Potential Man. Yeah.
When he didn't hit his full potential, where was he in a relative scale? Like, was his half potential really high?
It was really, really good. So he's in the series, he's among the kids who are the main characters, he's definitely one of the most powerful and one of the most advanced in his batch. But he could be eons more powerful simply because of that head start that he has. He just doesn't believe that he can get there. He always
This is actually a very interesting concept, because I'm just thinking, people always say, and this is probably a weird way to put it, but people always say don't have dreams, have goals. Achieve the goal and then move on. But what if you don't have goals? What if you have dreams that are big, that are world changing, that so many things need to change for you to achieve it? Like, I want to be Prime Minister of India when I'm a certain age. And if I tell that as a 29-year-old over a dinner conversation with a bunch of acquaintances in Melbourne, they're going to be like, what are you saying? Right? But what if I take that dream, I'm not going to call it a goal, what if I take that dream a little tad bit seriously and be like, maybe someday I could do it, and I could do a couple of things here and there to sort of try to achieve it, and I'll keep working towards that dream. I feel like that in some way just gives you purpose and also helps you achieve a lot of these interim goals that you're achieving while having an overarching narrative, which is a bigger dream. I don't know, it's probably unstructured. What do you think?
I like the idea that as long as you do a little bit of that dream, you keep walking towards it, albeit slowly. At some point, you should get there. And I think what really stops people from doing that is every time you declare that you're going to do something that is really improbable for you to achieve, 10 minutes after you start your work, whatever that may be, it might be the first step. Like, let's say I decide that I want to be a fashion designer. If I had to do it, me, somebody that has never picked up a paintbrush in his life other than for like a guided watercolor session for beginners, if I really had to become a designer, what would I do? I'd probably, I don't know, buy a course, right? I'd understand the principles of design. I'd do some practice sketches. I'd maybe call somebody and ask them to let me be their intern for free, and I'd do that on the side. And perhaps in 6 or 7 years, I might not become the leading designer of India or something like that, but I might reach perhaps like an assistantship level of capability or skill just by doing all of the things one after the other. But what's going to happen when I start is half an hour after I begin, I will come across somebody or some comment on the internet or like some belief within my own head that pops up out of nowhere and casts doubt on what I'm trying to do. You can't do it. This is stupid. This is unrealistic. Forget about it. Do something that will actually work. Those are the sorts of voices that pop up and prevent you from doing the legwork that you need to do in order to get there.
That's interesting, because earlier you said that you always were embarrassed of setting really high goals, or you were embarrassed of chasing that 100 because the failure from not having that 100 would be embarrassing, probably because people are going to be like, why'd you even try for like a dream like this? You failed anyway, right? And now you're saying something similar to that again. So why do you feel like the embarrassment weighs on you, or it's something that deters you, or why do these voices come in your head? Because you're clearly setting a goal that nobody is even, it's so daunting that nobody is even thinking of setting, or a dream that nobody is even thinking of chasing. We as people should already feel like we're already a step ahead, where we're chasing these dreams or setting these dreams, and we're vulnerable enough to tell people and get laughed at a little bit. It's like, why can't we use that laughter or that embarrassment as fuel for getting ahead instead of as,
sort of discouragement? But that, I think, takes a level of, I don't want to call it delusion. I feel like that's derogatory. Maybe we can reclaim it, but it requires a lot of determination and a willingness to shut everything out and truly trust yourself and your judgment, and then just go and do it. Do whatever it takes. No matter how long it takes, you never stop believing that it will soon or later be yours. And the people that have truly done it, I feel like that's the running theme in most of their lives. So other than the ones that were childhood prodigies who achieved success very early, or who had like a whole battalion of people that were supporting them to get to some very specific goal, like let's say tennis players or swimmers or stuff like that, right? I think anybody that has come from a background which might not have been very conducive to success in a particular field, and then they've gone on to achieve success in that field, they've had that level of fuck all of you, I'm just going to go out and like do my thing and watch me. And that belief that they have, that goes against everything that logic or reality is trying to push onto them. The absence of that is what creates this sense of embarrassment that, oh, people are laughing at me. People might be right. I might actually just be a fraud. I might just be a failure. I should not consider myself as better than others. Or why do I deserve greatness? What have I done that?
Almost like the environment around you is trying to make you more logical and realistic. It's saying, hey, look, we care about you. Other people have tried and failed miserably. So don't go down that path. Just go down the beaten path and don't have dreams. Don't try to show that something that is not possible is possible.
Yeah, I think it's like you're wired to look for danger and look for possibilities of failure or catastrophe. So that's all you see, when there are also opportunities for tremendous success everywhere, or even piecemeal success. And those often get overshadowed by and that's what stops people. I think it's like you need to, over time, train yourself to start seeing more and more of the possibility and less of the danger.
But that's interesting. I want to use that word, the possible. There's also this thrill, weird, positive feeling that you get when you have a dream or have a goal that you feel is a little bit beyond what you at that point can realistically achieve. Right? Like, and there's a certain kind of thrill about it. Where do you think that thrill comes from? Like, I have a view on it, but what's your view? Like, just setting that goal gives you a certain kind of thrill.
I think setting that goal appeals to the fundamental impulse of the human spirit to appreciate what is large and absurd and sublime. That's the word, the one that captures the essence of it best. Sublime, right? It's like you look at a mountain. When I went to Pokhara, I saw Manaslu, Annapurna and Nanga Parbat all in one frame. And the only thing I could think of was just how vast and gorgeous this view is. And when we think about us becoming that mountain, so to speak, right? Like us becoming larger than life, it's like being one with that sublime thing that exists out there. It's becoming so much bigger than who you are. You might be somebody that came from like a small town, nobody would give a second glance to, and then you reach a point where nobody can look away from you. And just the possibility of that, it's like a phenomenon. That is what appeals to me, for sure. Perhaps it's like an ego thing or a validation thing, but it just seems beautiful, and that's why I dream.
And being a phenomena is almost, you have something to leave behind that people can see and look at and learn from and emulate, because you've done it and you've shown people that it can be done. And because you said the beautiful picture that I can almost visualize of those 3 beyond 8,000 meter peaks, I thought of this documentary that we've both watched that we discussed, Nims Pujara, climbing those 12 peaks within 14 peaks.
Yeah.
And the saying, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about setting a dream, or setting a dream as a goal, rather. Because a goal would be to like climb Everest, or climb one of these mountains in a year. But a dream would be to do all 14 of them within 1 year. Nobody's done that before.
Yeah. But Ronit, like for me and you, climbing just one of those could be a dream, and then that dream could evolve. For Nims, climbing all 14 in less time than anybody else is a dream, but I see what you're saying. Why shouldn't I think of all 14 as a possibility? Yeah.
No, but what I'm also saying is, for him to set that goal is also just as unrealistic, because nobody's done it before him. He doesn't have a benchmark or an example to work towards. He doesn't have anybody who he can speak to about, hey, you did this. Can you give me guidance? He's the first one to go ahead and do it. And it takes a certain kind of spirit to be like, I'm going to do this even though nobody's done it, regardless of what anyone says. Or I'm going to try to do it. I can fail. I'll try again. But I'm going to prove something that's possible. And that's the entire idea of this conversation, right? Like the idea that there are things that we feel like are beyond possible, but you and I and our friends and people that we know every day are doing things that we feel at a personal level are not possible for us to do. But they're showing us these examples from their daily lives, from their normal lives. And if we can have a conversation mining those experiences, then I think that's valuable, because this is not Nims Pujara. This is not Cristiano Ronaldo. This is my mom who wakes up every morning at 5 a.m. and shows me tremendous discipline for the 20 years of her life when she's done that. That's consistency. And that shows me that you don't need to be a superhuman to do these things, right?
Yeah. So if you can take that thrill that people feel from setting high goals and then just incorporate that, I guess, in everyday life or in just a lot of the different aspirations that people have, then that can lead them to a much happier life than one that they otherwise would lead, where they didn't exactly work towards maximizing that potential or whatever that they have. But I also like to think about it in terms of what is it that is so great about making those small steps towards that person that you want to become, right? Because at each stage of hitting that dream that you have, you're going to face like a wall that you have to break through. And all of these negative voices and things like that that prevent you from getting there are going to be amplified, and they're going to feel as harsh and as strong as they did on the first day that you tried to do anything in that direction. But every time you overcome them, that hit that you feel when you take action of overcoming that challenge, I feel like there's no high that can describe it. It feels like a hit of coke, like literally. It feels like you're euphoric and you are so proud of yourself, and in that moment you have your respect, your own respect, that you overcame all kinds of fear and doubt in order to move in that direction. In some small way. And it doesn't need to be climbing Everest or whatever, right? It can be, there are so many different dreams and goals that it could easily apply to in your life, because people just have so many things that they want to do.
And once they do it, they also set an example for other people that they can do it. And it doesn't have to be the same goal. It can be that I set a goal and I achieved it. Whatever's your goal, you can achieve it too. Creates a cascading effect. And I think there's another element to this, which is you achieving your goals. And this is probably what I was also saying, like you achieving your goals pushes other people to achieve theirs in some way, because they feel like it's possible. And you feel like you've paved that way.
Yeah. And I think that's incredibly important to have that library of cases where you see somebody and you think, why can't I do it? If he can do it, I can do it. Or this person has showed me the way to do it. And sometimes you won't always have that example, because somebody will always do something before somebody else has done it. But I feel like if you look for it, if you look for inspiration, you will find inspiration in a person or in whatever you need to find it in. I saw this podcast where I think Tony Robbins was talking to, I think, Theo Vaughn, the comedian. And he said, how many yellow objects do you have in your room right now? Right? And if you really think about it, you will probably find 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or many more than that, because you're looking for them. But if I were to ask you off the top of your head how many yellow objects there are, you might not be able to. You'll probably say there are like 2 or 3 at most. And that might be an educated guess. But what you look for is what you end up seeing and holding on to. So in my case, let's say I had like one goal that at the time seemed really unrealistic before somebody actually went ahead and did it, which was go to ISB and then get into McKinsey.
Yep.
And then one of my seniors ended up doing it, Saharsh, from VIT, from DevSoc, same program, and he got through, right? And that really solidified the resolve that I had in me that if he's done it, I should also be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I looked for any information in his journey that would help me strengthen that resolve and convince myself that somebody with my experience has a shot. And then when I started looking at the CVs of the people that got shortlisted, that's what I was looking for. There was one CV out of, let's say, 70 or 80 shortlisted resumes, which are taken from 800 others that are submitted to these companies. One out of all of these had some public sector experience, which was in a similar line of work as the one that I had been doing before ISB. And that's all I needed. And the fact that my senior got through. I said, I'll emulate my journey after these people who have shown me what success looks like.
Yeah.
And that's how I will chart my own path.
You were looking for that example, and you were almost looking for that example in people that you felt most closely were like you, right? You weren't looking for these examples in people who had gone to the top undergraduate, graduated first of their class, and then got into ISB, and then again were probably graduating, first in their class and applying to these programs. And that's an interesting distinction that I want to make, I think is important, because when we look for inspiration outside of these contexts, we look at those people. We look at Cristiano Ronaldo and Nims, Pujara, but in this case, you were able to do it because you looked at those examples and you went through your 800 resumes and you found one and you were like, I'm going to emulate these two people and mine for data that will help me chart my path. Why don't we do that enough when we're looking for inspiration or when we're looking for examples in our normal lives? It's almost like a recipe for they are different from you.
Now that I think about it, no matter what you pick as an aspiration, you will find some examples of people that have come from very similar circumstances as you, or at least are nothing extraordinary. And they ended up doing something that you want to do. But yeah, we don't look for those examples often enough, or as often as we'd like to. Or I think one more explanation that I might have for this is you get beaten down over time. Some of your optimism goes away as you grow older and you see more failure in life. So you start looking for it less and less, unless some big change happens and then you're like, it's time to lock in. It's time to chase after this again, and I gotta live my values and I have to be true to my dreams. But I do think that over time, your stamina for trying improbable things definitely takes a hit. If I look at myself, right after VIT ended and we'd done a bunch of debating and like we had some decent amount of success in that activity, I was in Delhi and like I had a job which I knew would set me up well for success at my master's program, which was going to start in 2 years. Like I had an early admission. So that part of things was taken care of. And I wanted to use that as an opportunity to explore music, learning Spanish, Jujutsu, and get really good at all three of these things. And at the time, India had like 4 blue belts in BJJ. The US probably had hundreds or thousands of people at the blue belt level because Jujutsu had existed there and was being taught there by experienced instructors for a very long time.
Yep.
I think the craze started after UFC 1 happened in 1996, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, the Gracies from Brazil went to the US and started establishing centers. So you have to have been taught by somebody that can trace their lineage to the original Brazilian family that came up with this martial art for it to be legit. And in India, we had one instructor. He was a purple belt at the time. So it's white, blue, purple, brown, black. Right. And he had his center in Delhi that I used to go to. And I was determined to become, if I had stuck to it, I might be a purple belt right now. But I fell out of it because life happened. Shit happened. And I had to cut off like a lot of my aspirations. And I ended up with like just work.
Yeah.
And then I didn't go back and restart all of the other threads, which honestly would have been of the other stuff that we resort to when it comes to taking care of ourselves, right? I feel like overcoming challenges, chasing your dreams, however small they might be, however improbable they might be, keeps you hopeful, keeps you kicking, keeps you full of energy, puts you in situations where you're with other positive people who are working towards the same thing.
Yeah, it's almost like reclaiming your old childish dreams.
Yeah.
And I feel like, do you feel like if you had an example of someone like you who was in a similar job, was in Delhi or in a different city, was interested and had taken this up and then fell out of flavor, but came back to it a couple of years later and then just continued on and then fell out of flavor again, but just had this recurring coming back to it and trying it whenever they could. If you had an example like that, you think that would have affected your decision to sort of go back and try it again? Because somebody showing you that.
Absolutely. I think looking at somebody who stopped and started, who got through some shit, came back to it, stuck to it.
Yeah.
That's incredibly important. I've learned that quite late, to be honest. Because you remember like in college, we used to go to do strong lifts every day to the gym.
Yeah.
And I had an injury in my upper back.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of My bench press form. So what happens is if you have like, and I know that now after having worked with a physiotherapist to address it, somebody who knew what they were doing, the upper back has like your rotator cuff muscles, which help you rotate your shoulder up and down, right? So
Yeah.
I always had a weak set of rotator cuff muscles because of my hunched over posture when I code or type. I don't code. First, like when I write or use a laptop, right? And that ended up getting aggravated by bench presses, by barbell bench presses.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was like literally no guidance about how to deal with that sort of thing on the internet. For example, we didn't have like a mountain of fitness influencers telling you, hey, if your shoulder's hurting, this is what you should do, or shit like that, right? Or somebody reassuring you that, hey, it's okay. When you start working out, you get injured.
Yep.
And then you got to get back in the gym. And I just let that discourage me, and I didn't work out again for like 2 years after that. And then I started going back to the gym, but I was like, the machines and nothing will happen. And I skipped that. And then last year, after I came back from South America, I started taking the gym seriously again. And guess what? I got hurt again, right? Like this time, it was my shoulder that started to get impinged, and I finally went to a physiotherapist who knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And then I was given like a whole protocol for how to deal with things when this happens. But I was still extremely dejected because I just felt like every time I try this, the universe pushes me back and says, no, you continue being fat, continue being unfit. You know, this isn't for you. You're never going to have like a top 2% physique.
Yeah.
It's not in the cards for you, right? And I used to let all of that negativity in whenever I thought about my injury, and I thought about how shitty it was to not be able to go to the gym again and again like I was. But then after some time, my shoulder got better because the exercises started working, and I just decided, fuck it, I'll do something else. I'll do other exercises, but I gotta go back. I gotta go back to the gym, right? And that whole process of going back again and again, or like of not being perfect, of not being the model for achievement. That's what you want.
Exactly. And that is beautiful and also powerful, because your example of going back even after you got injured is an example for everybody else who wants to do it consistently but is facing a roadblock in terms of injuries. And if I were to go back and if I kept getting injured, then I'd be like, oh, my friend, he got injured. He went to a physio, he worked through it, and he got back. I'm not at that point looking for an example of somebody who started, who has exceptional genetics, probably never gotten injured and got his great physique in sub 12 months time. I'm looking for this imperfect, so to speak, example, right? Which is also probably something that would have helped you, like you said, where if somebody went back to Jujutsu, kept going back at it, that would have nudged you to also go back and keep doing it. Those imperfect examples that humanize like the people who are achieving it, that don't make you feel like these are godly people that have a certain superpower that you have. Those are the examples that are important, that we often don't mind in our lives, which we should give more focus on.
Do you have a rival?
No. Do you have a rival?
Like, I have several rivals, but I think you also have rivals. So, you know, like in Pokemon, Ash had a rival, Gary, and like in every zone, the main character has a rival. I think everybody has like that rival that doesn't know that they are your rival, but they're your rival, right? And this rival is always like perfect in every way that you think you're not. They've got every single tailwind that you felt like you deserved, but you never got or you wanted. And if you had that, then you would have achieved what this person did, right? And you didn't. Right? I can think of several guys that like I always wanted to be like, and I used to compare myself to them, and I was like, he's perfect. This motherfucker doesn't miss. Like in the heat of battle, he doesn't miss. In the heat of controversy, he doesn't miss, right? And like, look at me, like all I do is miss shots, right? And I use that to feel bad about myself, but that doesn't help. It's not going to get you to where you want to be if you keep comparing yourself with that one person that is so different from you and that has a completely different life.
You almost want to compare yourself to him because he's so different from you. Because you're probably in some way, we are probably in some way averse to changing. Because they're already so different from you and you can't make so many changes to be that person. You're like, is this not possible?
No, so you remember how in VIT, you had that friend of yours that was at Yale. And then like we had that other debater guy who was at Oxford, and like He just kept getting better and better internships and like hotter and hotter girlfriends or a better and better physique. And like, I was just like, bro, like, I want you to lose like just once. I can feel better. But yeah,
that's like going into a spiral, right? We probably shouldn't have been doing that. We should have looked at, which we did do. We did look at our seniors who were closer to us, less perfect, weren't from a debate, because we're talking about debate success here, right? Like people who didn't come from an institution like a law school DevSoc that had years and years of legacy, seniors who came and trained them, established structures, lots of funding, this institutional support of college that they were in to go ahead and do this. We came from an engineering college where our seniors were the first debaters that actually went ahead and broke at tournaments, reached quarters, didn't win. And they helped us because we could associate with them. We could be like, if they can do this, then we can do this. And when they pushed the bar a bit further, we were like, if they can push the bar a bit further, we can push the bar further than that. And that eventually sort of cascaded to the point where you could then go ahead and rival the person that you always wanted to and actually beat them because you followed a different path. You saw different role models who were imperfect, but at every point helped you get to the next stage.
I think that's key. Pick a goal and then find somebody that isn't perfect. That's like more of a reflection of you, right? Exactly. They have the same disadvantages perhaps, or they had the same set of doubts that you did, and then they just went ahead and did it anyway. And speaking to them will break through that glass in your mind and actually perhaps get you to take action. And I think from time to time, as your circumstances change, you need to keep looking for that support out there in the universe, because the one thing that's on you is you cannot stop believing. All right? Okay. Next week, same time.
Yep.
Cool.